Uh, Good morning, everybody. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is how to start. And I'm going to look at maybe four audiences. The first audience are the companies. The second are the academic researchers. The third one, which I saw on the list, are communities, regional bodies. And then the fourth are the support. And I want to focus on how to use the support services. Now, I don't participate. I train people how to participate. So there's no secrets. I want to show you how it works. So what I've done on slide number 1, which is in your notes, you'll see a web page, H2020 company website. So any website I mention in here is there, but I think the publication that's in your notes is really excellent, and I want to show you the relevance of that. Now, what I'd like to look at, if I could have it on the screen here, it would help also. What I'd like to look at is the structure. So for those of you that are not familiar with Horizon 2020, the structure, the layout, the TRL, I want to use that as a method of explaining Horizon 2020. And then I want to talk about networking. I want to explain what the concept of real networking is about. Then I want to say a few words about money, because when companies are here, they want to know about money. And finally, then, if you decide, okay, this is for me, how do I proceed? So is it possible to have the slides on the screen here? Because I don't have it on my screen here. Now, 28 member states come together and they agree a thing called a treaty. Now, in the treaty, it identifies areas where the 28 countries agree to cooperate. So, for example, they agree to cooperate in the world of innovation. They agree to cooperate in making business environment good. They cooperate on culture, lifelong learning. They also cooperate on things like transport, agriculture, and so on. Now, whenever they agree to cooperate in an area, they didn't put money in place to say, this is how we're going to fund the cooperation. So Horizon 2020 is there to support the innovation policies. There's another program called COSME, which you'll hear mentioned through the European Enterprise Network. There's another program, Erasmus. There's a program called Creative Europe for the audiovisual sector. And there's another program called the structural funds. Now, in the past, structural funds were used to build roads and bridges. But now 80 billion of the structural funds has been diverted away from roads into something called innovation. So innovation has become the new agriculture in Brussels. 25 years ago, the money went to agriculture. Over the next 25 or 10, 15, innovation is the big theme. So there's actually two programs, and today we're focusing on Horizon 2020. Now, one of the big themes in Brussels today is they want more links between these. And I want to show you some of those links that are happening within Horizon 2020. Now, no VGA input, so if you can transfer it up, okay. Now, here, I'm on now, okay. Now, there's something else happening in Brussels. Over the past number of years, there's a concept called joint programming. They want to mix national and European funding. Now, Anna will be talking about Eurostars. It's not officially part of joint programming, but Eurostars is an example where you get national funding and European funding, and this is a trend. So the two trends are mixing with other European programs and also mixing with national and also mixing with private, public-private partnerships. Now, there's an important message in this slide. If you want to understand the funding program, you have to understand the policy behind the program. Now, they say trying to understand Brussels for people in Southern Ireland is like trying to understand cricket. You can watch it forever and you'll never figure out how it works. So if you want to understand a game like cricket, and maybe it's something the Northern Ireland people can teach us, because I certainly have no idea what's going on, right? You need to understand who the players are. What's the relationship between the players? What are the rules of the game? Now, the support staff are there, like the caddies or the support staff, to explain the rules and so on. But if you want to understand this game, the politicians, these are the people we elected last May. The members of the European Parliament, the ministers like Minister Bruton, they have no money for you. They're not the people to go to. The people that look after the programs is an organization called the European Commission. They're civil servants, career professionals, and they administer the programs. Now, European Commission has actually two jobs. The first thing they do is they make policy with the politicians. Now, policy is about identifying what challenges will face Europe in the next 10 or 15 years. Now, top of the list, energy security. If the lights go out in Europe, you have political chaos. Next one is kind of public health, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, creating jobs, addressing youth unemployment. So this isn't kind of fiction, it's real challenges. Now, between 2000 and 2009, they were trying to debate what kind of challenges are the important ones for the next 10 or 15 years. And in the middle of 2013, the politicians said, okay, we'll give you 80 billion, and we want you to focus on information technology, energy, health, and so on. And so that went on for about 4 years. Now, these poor devils then, in the middle of 2013, were tied to their desks for 3 months. So the politicians said, spend 8.1 billion on research and innovation, information technology. They said, what the hell are we going to write? So they were literally at their desk trying to write these huge documents that you get. And this is the basis then of Horizon 2020. So whenever you see a work program or a document coming out of Brussels, you have to go back and understand what's the background to it. Now, for the support staff, if you read the document, you can say this is what they want to fund. The support staff are there to say, well, the reason they're funding renewable energy is because there's a set plan in Brussels and so on. So part of the job of the advisors is to understand the thinking behind the specific parts of the program. Now, the politicians on the Commission are public officials. They're not the experts. You're the experts. So when they're making the policy, and especially when they're writing the program, they actually consult people like you. In America, this is called lobbying. In Europe, it's called consulting the stakeholders. So this is how I'm actually going to give my presentation. Instead of describing the funding, I'm first going to describe the policy, then I'll describe the funding, and then I'll describe the lobbying or the networking that you have to do. Now, a lot of you today have not met me before, so I just need to get some water here. For those of you that did not meet me before, that slide took 11 years of my life to figure out. So I hope you like it. And without understanding this kind of thinking, you can't really get the grasp of what's going on. Now, let's look at the policy. What are the kind of political priorities in Brussels? The first challenge they look are social challenges. Now, that's aging society is a huge one. So there's a lot of research on that. Cancer, diabetes, efficient energy systems, efficient transport systems. Now, this is something that's not available. This is not something that we think about locally. In Europe, you can't compare Germany to Sweden. You can't compare Sweden to Ireland or Ireland to Malta. So what they do in Brussels is they divide Europe into 274 regions. So you have the border, Midlands, West, the Northern Ireland is a region. Now, in the past, what they did is they analyzed the regions and they said, well, we need to develop roads in Bantry, as you were saying. You know, we need to go down to West Cork and build roads. And now they're building roads in Romania and Croatia and so on, or train tracks and so on. But what they've done now is they've said there's an innovation divide. So the level of innovation in Cavan might be less than the level of innovation in Cork, is less than the innovation in Dublin, and compared to Ballymena or whatever. So a regional innovation divide has become a huge topic, and that's where they're focusing the structural funds. So I want to show you how that fits into Horizon 2020. Now, this is the big one, making industry more competitive. Now, up to Framework 6, up to about 2007, the big debate in Brussels was we need to make industry more competitive. But something amazing happened in 2007. The basic scientists learned how to lobby. Now, I've been looking at Brussels since 1980, 34 years now. I saw the best lobbying strategy in June 2013. 56 Nobel Prize winners arrived in Brussels to meet the President of the Commission, the President of the Parliament, and the President of the Council. Now, can you imagine sitting across the table from 56 Nobel Prize winners? They doubled the budget for basic science between Framework 7 and Horizon 2020. You know, so it does work. So now, between 2009 and the 30th of November 2011, this is exactly the debate that was going on in Brussels. Now, on the 30th of November 2011, the Commission sent a proposal to the politicians saying, okay, if these are the challenges you want to address, why don't we have a program called Horizon 2020? And let's divide it into 3 pillars. We'll have a pillar looking at societal challenges. Now, at the same time, they were discussing the structural funds. Now, each country was asked to prepare a document called a smart specialisation strategy, and in fact, each region was asked to do it. Now, Ireland's one was submitted a few weeks ago. So if you have not heard of the smart specialisation strategy for Northern Ireland, then you're missing out, because this is what's going to define how the structural funds are going to be diverted into regional innovation. They said, let's have a pillar making industry more competitive, and let's have a pillar making Europe the leader in science. So that's where the 3 pillars came from. Now, here's an important message. They want European scientists operating at international levels. So they want us cooperating with America, China, India, and so on. So you'll see a lot of this kind of international dimension. And now I can introduce Horizon 2020. So these are the sub-programs. And if you look at the health program, I saw Kay somewhere. Where's Kay? Okay, there's Kay there. She's the national contact point. And who's the Northern Ireland national contact point for health? You're at the back there. Okay. Now, the people we have here today are the people that know about these programs. And I imagine, Kay, you have this on your bedside locker, do you? The work program. So you read the 96-page document and you said, what the hell is this? You meet Kay at the back. And if you look at this diagram, this book here, that's in your notes, it goes through all the programs, the food program, the energy program, the transport program. There's money also for the humanities. Now, a few weeks ago, I was in a class in Helsinki, and I didn't know who I was getting. I had only humanities, theatre people, dance researchers, and we were able to find funding for them. You know, it was actually dance for aging. The role of dance is, so you name it, you can have the humanities, the energy people. If you go through these programs, you can find it. And the search engine you mentioned in the app is really brilliant for finding the topics. But I think you need the personal touch. Now, we're at the size of a country where we can meet the national contact points. So if I'm going for topic PHC 16, Kay probably knows what I'm talking about, and you know that topic. And this is the role of the support staff. Now, secure societies is also interesting. A huge theme in secure society is border security, the European border. And Ireland and Northern Ireland, we have a marine border, and I know in West Cork they're looking at marine border security. So the opportunities are absolutely huge. Now, I have to say something before I leave this slide. If you're not reading these work programs, just forget about it. If you meet the people who are very successful, they analyze these in detail. They're not expecting some advisor to read it for them. And when I go to centres that win lots of funding, you see them coming with the work programs and the little sticky tapes out of it, and they all underlined. So there's a bit of homework for you to do. And on the website, you can actually download these 96 or 90-page documents. Now, this is called Pillar 2. Information and communication technologies, that's an 8.1 billion. I saw Stephen somewhere. Where's Stephen? Yeah, he knows it backwards. Who's the Northern Ireland person for ICT? You're down here. So these are the people that you're going to meet in the afternoon. You have nano, materials, biotech, space. Space is about space technologies. But there was a flooding project funded in space in Framework 7. So it's also about applications and so on. Now, innovation in SMEs. Now, in Ireland, Northern Ireland, an SME is a small startup company. In Ireland, we're fanatical about startups. In Finland, they're totally fanatical about startups and so on. But in Brussels, they're not thinking about startups anymore. They're thinking about scale-ups. Or they have another word for them, they call them gazelles. The animal that runs along and jumps up very fast. So what they're looking for are companies that exist that have the potential to become big companies. And the kind of model they're talking about is Angry Birds in Finland, which came out of University of Aalto with 3 or 4 people, and now it's a huge, huge business. That's what they're looking for. So when they're looking at the SME instrument, they're looking for the gazelles. They're not looking for a company that's going to hire 2 or 3 people. And this program here, Innovation in SME, is about support services. And there's a mention of Eurostar, so Anna will say a few words about this. Access to finance, they're giving money to venture capital companies. And they're giving money to banks to invest in these gazelles and also to invest in infrastructure. Now, anybody who's doing research on the topic of innovation, you'll also find lots of studies at the end of those last 2 programs. Now, Pillar 1 is for the universities and academics. ERC, the 4 of the Nobel Prize winners that were announced a few weeks ago had ERC grants. Really competitive. And for universities, ERC is amazing. But for small companies, it's not really for you. FIT, I love FIT. FIT is for crazy ideas. You wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you have this crazy idea, you can't go back to sleep,
You text a few of your buddies, you write 15 pages, and then you go back to sleep. It's just to give scientists an opportunity, a bit of freedom. If I went back doing research, I just go straight to FIT. It's really radical. It's not incremental innovation. And I think FIT should become a kind of a place where people with ideas that kind of everybody's kind of ignoring. Now, I mean a radical innovation. It's a completely new way of looking at things. It's a really fascinating one. Now, Mary Slodowska, Jennifer will talk about this in the next speech. Marie Curie is about funding people, and research infrastructure is about identifying new infrastructures that Europe will want to build over the next 10 or 15 years. So here we are, Pillar 1. So this is the language, Pillar 1, looking at science. Pillar 2, looking at making industry more competitive. And Pillar 3, looking at societal challenges. So when you read this book here, you can see all the ERC, industrial leadership, SME program, and it identifies who's the person here. And I think in the afternoon, these are the exact people that are in the room today. There's another thing called the European Innovation Institute for Innovation and Technology. It's funding something called a KIC, KIC, Knowledge Innovation Community. Now, for the regional bodies here, it's about, if you take something like photonics, you can bring the Tyndall Institute, the universities, and the companies together to develop an expertise at regional level. Now, I see the KICs in EIT as a model for regional innovation. So this is one of the things that the regional body should look at, the EIT. Euratom, let's forget about it. It's about nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. But there is a section in there looking at radiation protection. And the European Commission has 7 institutes of their own called the Joint Research Centres. You know, and again, that's for those. Now, for each of those programs, you have all these people called national contact points and national support services. Now, here's some kind of political language. Bottom up means you are totally free to submit anything you like. So that's why universities and research centres like Pillar 1. Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 are top down. In other words, if you're putting a proposal into the energy programme, you have to identify what's the policy behind it and what's the real thinking behind that particular topic. So when you're talking about networking and lobbying, it's really for Pillar 2 and Pillar 3. And I think that's why universities like Pillar 1, whereas Pillar 2 and 3 is really home territory for companies. But Jennifer will show that in the Marie Curie, that there's also opportunities in there for companies. Now here's something that for companies, it's called a public-private partnership. The European Commission went out to industry and they said, okay, are there any areas in particular that Europe would like to lead in? So the Innovative Medicines Initiative is a €2 billion sub-program that's about reducing the cost of developing drugs. With Excel, Clean Sky, environmentally friendly aircraft, bio-based industry. So these are kind of sub-programs. And so if you take Excel, I think, Stephen, you're probably the national contact point for that. And these are very industry-driven. So if you're putting in a proposal here, you have to write it with industry in mind. Whereas in other parts of the program, you can write it from an academic point of view. And these are other industry areas like energy efficient buildings, factory of the future, big data. And these are used to define topics within the program. So it's called a public-private partnership. Now, if any of those are relevant to you, when you're talking to the support staff, you'll hear them talking about things like the factory of the future and so on. And they understand the kind of background debate. But these are specific areas that industry has lobbied and said, we want a focus on these particular areas. Now, this is a slide just to say, if I was talking to a small company and say, look, up here, FET is good for crazy ideas, Marie Curie is good for funding people, and the video that we saw before, it was a very good example of transfer between a university and a company. 13% of the budget in the collaborative type projects where you have a consortium, 13% is set aside for SMEs. And the SME instrument, there's 7% of the budget here for you. So having small companies in here is a huge priority for the European Commission. And here then is for research-intensive SMEs, which Anna will talk about in Eurostars. And this is for venture capital companies, where they can actually get funding to share the risk when they're investing in high growth companies. In this program, 13% and 7%, so that's 20% of the budget of these programs is specifically targeted for small companies. So you're not coming with a begging bowl as a small company. The universities need you in their consortia to get the actual type of funding. Now, for the regional people, I would tell you, look at the EIT program, because it gives you an idea of how regional networks are set up to promote smart specialization and so on. Now, you're going to hear about this. This the SME instrument. Again, 3 phases, €50,000, 1.5 in the second phase, and so on. Again, there's topics identified, SME only. Now, this is a very unique type of grant in that it can be submitted by a company on its own. And in the first call, 78% of the applications had only companies. Now, here is the results. And I think this was mentioned this morning that they got 2,226 proposals and only 317 were eligible because they received rubbish. This has nothing to do with the European Union. There were people putting in proposals saying, we're setting up a 2-person company or whatever. They were looking for gazelles. They were looking for companies that had the potential to become really high-growth companies. So again, talking to the consultants and the advisors and so on, this is very, very competitive. So 155 of the 317 were funded. So the real success rate was 39%. So in other words, if you're suitable to this, then there's a good chance of success. But, you know, and I spoke to the evaluators and they said, we just couldn't find projects. One woman said, I got 15 proposals and none of them I could put on as an eligible proposal. So I think we really have to look at this. And I think Ireland had the highest success rate in applications. But I think this is a really amazing opportunity for small companies. But I think consultants and advisors have to be realistic and say to a company, look, you've no hope. You're a brilliant company, but you're a 5-person company. But if you have the potential to grow, then there's some real great opportunities with this type of grant. Now, TRL is not a European Union concept. It was invented in 1977 by the Space Agency in America, and it was invented to kind of describe the state of development of a technology. So TRL 9 means it's on the market. So there's a photograph of my mouse. TRL 1 means it's a concept in my head. 2, 3 means we're experimenting in the laboratory. So there is the official TRL4 version of the mouse. It was a circular. The guy could just move a dot across the screen, but he proved the concept, and they were probably drinking champagne that it worked and so on. Now, you couldn't sell the thing to anybody. Now, Framework 7 came to TRL4. It was about funding laboratory research. 5, 6, and 7 is about demonstrating, prototyping, piloting, and there's another new terminology here. It's called a living lab. So if you're doing research on, say, aging society, a nursing home could be a living lab where we test the concept in a real living environment. Now, that's why Horizon 2020 is called a research and innovation program, because it's going up to about TRL 7. Now, this was a quotation I got from a guy. He was head of one of the top 5 computer companies in America. And this was the statistic in 2011, and that company doesn't exist anymore, you know. So again, a lot of what comes out of laboratories is not visibly useful, but there is the stage of prototyping and demonstration. And I see companies' opportunity is in 5, 6, and 7. Now, in the case of biotechnology, this would be the equivalent. But under European competition law and international state aid rules, public bodies can only fund up to about TRL 8. So if we want to see which type of companies are suited, you could draw a map between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, and what we saw yesterday in the convention centre. You could say these are the research centres. These are what I call research and technology organisations. Like yesterday we saw 38 technology centres that are there to bring the results of university research out to industry. Now, you have research-intensive companies like spin-offs from universities, and you have high-tech companies like Lintimplex and so on, who can take high technologies. Now, there's a very interesting report that was published in the UK called the Vital 6%. They found that 6% of these companies were generating half the jobs in the UK. So I think this is the kind of study that's needed, say, in Northern Ireland, to say, of all the companies we have, which are the 6% that are suited to Horizon 2020? And I think anybody that's willing to spend half a day here or a whole day here, I think a lot of you are in that 6%. So it's not suitable to every type of company, but companies that can take the results of research and do demonstration and so on, those are the ones that are suited. Now let's see where the programs fit. Now we'll hear Anna talking about Eurostars. So Eurostars is really TRL 567, so it's really suitable to industry. ERC, forget about it. That's for Trinity and University of Ulster and so on. FET is about TRL 2. So again, it's looking at kind of radical new ideas. But Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, if you're a company, you can see, okay, I could be in there as a demonstrator. Public-private partnerships are perfect for companies that's really going close to the market. Marie Curie, Jennifer will show, it moves from, basic science right up to industrial PhDs and RISE and so on. EIT is trying to position itself here at about 5, 6, and 7, and access to finance is here. Now, I hope you appreciate that slide. That took 4 years to design that slide. Between 2009 and 2013, I read everything, and this was the end result. And now, for the advisors, this is very important. If you go to an advisor and say, I'm interested in FET and PPP, they'll say, well, the background to FET is this, the background to PPP is this. If you try to learn this, I'm at this game for 30 years, and it still took me 4 years to figure it out. But you can go to an advisor on FET or Marie Curie, and they will tell you within 10 minutes, look, this is suitable for you, or this is not suitable. So I think trying to do this without your support staff just doesn't make sense. And this is the home territory of the support staff that you're looking at today. Networking. Now, can I give you my definition of networking? Right, you're a small company outside in DRC. Where's Kevin from Mobstats? Is he here somewhere? There's Kevin, okay? Right, suppose I'm a researcher above in University of Ulster or in Trinity, and I'm doing a security proposal, and I need a company that's able to collect data from a large crowd, kind of crowd information. You're doing it for sports at the moment, but suppose I'm doing a security project, and I need somebody with your expertise. I am not going to look at LinkedIn. I'm not going to go on the search engine. I'm going to say, do you remember that fella Kevin that was into us last week? That 5 seconds, if you don't appear across my vision in that 5 seconds, you haven't been networking. So networking is about, for the companies, working with the people in the university. So when they say, okay, I have an idea for a proposal, who am I going to bring in? That's what it's all about. In the case of university people, there's a professor in the front. This is what I did. There was a professor in Freiburg in south of Germany. Whenever he came up with a new idea, he told me, for some reason, he said, your face appeared. You were the first person I always thought about when we were doing projects in photovoltaics. That means I had been networking. Now, he didn't pick me because I was some fellow from West Cork. That's, he picked me because he knew I had expertise in something, and he heard me speaking at conferences. We had coffee together. So if you're not drinking coffee with the academics, and the academics not drinking coffee around Europe, just forget about it. The tools that you presented are really excellent tools, but days like today and the coffee breaks are really important to make this personal touches. Now let's see, who should we be drinking coffee with? These are advisory groups. These are not programs. There's a thing called the KETS, the Key Enabling Technologies, 6 expert groups in photonics, industrial biotechnology, advanced manufacturing. There are 40 technology platforms. There's a technology platform in food, energy, photonics, and so on. The KICs I mentioned, the PPPs, European Innovation Partnerships, 5 think tanks, cost actions. Now, I could spend a whole morning going through all of these. Now, I have to be very honest here. The number of Irish and Northern Irish people on these expert groups are practically non-existent, a handful. Now, when I was doing research and I was in photovoltaics, there was never anything going on in Europe that I wasn't there. And if you look at the top centres in Europe, like Wageningen for food research, they have a strategy. They analyse every one of these expert groups, and they have people positioned on those. You know, and I think this is what Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland has to do. And this is where the sharing of information and networking goes on. Now, joint programming, ARNets. On my website, I've listed a lot of these. And I think this is the kind of analysis that is needed so that when a topic comes out, one guy in Finland and Sweden told me, he said, when I opened the work program and I read the topic, he said, yeah, I wrote that. He wrote the topic. Now, it didn't mean he was getting the money. But look at the advantage he had in that he understood all of the thinking behind it. Now, I want to say a few things about money. Now, for small companies, the money you get does not take equity. And the money you get, you do not have to pay it back. You know, you're forever dealing with banks and venture capital companies. In this case, it's money. So for small companies, you know, you're always looking for money, but this is real money that you don't have to get back. Now, if we look at our TRL scale, down at TRL 1, there's a lot of unknowns. So here the funding is about 100% funding. But as you get closer, you know, when the unknowns decrease and you're demonstrating and so on, the public funding is 70% and your private funding is 30%. And down here then it's pure venture capital investment. So there's a golden rule for companies. This should be funding something you want to do anyway. If you're just hunting money, you know, it's a total nuisance. Whenever I hear somebody complaining about Brussels bureaucracy, my first indication is these guys are only hunting money. But if you're developing a new app like you're with Mobstats and you want to go into this American market or international market and you're going there anyway, and this is giving you 300,000 on the table, I think, Kevin, you'll be quite happy. You know, but if it's going somewhere else, it's a total nuisance to you. So I think that's a key for companies. You have to have your plan and the funding should support the plan. Now, in the following slides, I give some sample calculations so you can see exactly how much money do you get. Okay, so that's the theory. Now you want to participate. And this is where the advisors really shine, because the program, the Horizon 2020 program, it's running from 2014 up to 2020. Now, the Commission writes what they call work programs, and there's about 15 work programs out there at the moment. And the first set of work programs only cover 2014 and 15. Now, Call 1, it's gone. Forget about it. Call 2, the deadlines are in February and March. So if you're a beginner, forget about Call 2. But don't worry, there's going to be another call in 2016, another 17. So your strategy is, what will we do for the first call? What will we do for the second call? So if you're a beginner in this, you need to know which program do I fit into? When is the next call? And to make life even more interesting, there's about 7 types of grants. One grant is for research, one is for innovation, one is for SME. Now, you know, if you're a beginner, this takes ages to learn. But for the advisors, this is kind of our home territory. You know, and when we talk, we'll say, look, that's the type of grant for that, that's the program, that's the call. So those are the key languages that you have to learn. Now, if the call, say, came out on the 29th of July, it could have a deadline on the 4th of February, 5 o'clock Brussels time. So you're given about 5 or 6 months to write it. Now, when the proposals go to Brussels, they get people like you to evaluate it. You know, it's not the Commission evaluates, it's they hire people like you. So becoming an evaluator is a really important part of the learning process, and there's a huge shortage of industrial evaluators. Now, if you're successful, they didn't have to negotiate the grant agreement or define the legal document, and the projects can run for 3 to 5 years. So if you're looking for money for next year, forget it. The project won't even be started. So this is kind of for long-term strategic activities. It isn't for funding that you need in the next couple of months. And up to 5 years after the project, there could be a financial audit. So these are the kind of different steps. But you're only at the beginning, which is at the box number 1 here, which is the proposal stage. Now, the website where you submit the proposal is called the Participant Portal. And it's a really good website. And again, the advisors use it every day. Now, in a consortium, you could have, say, 10 partners, 10 organizations. You have Trinity College leading it. You have, they invite you, Kevin, in as a partner. There's a partner in Helsinki and so on. And some poor devil is the coordinator. Now, that person is going to lose a lot of sleep. And there's a figure of about 350 person hours, maybe 40 days work for that poor devil. But if the project is divided into 6 work packages, it's not so bad. They might have 2 or 3 days work. But if you're a partner, Kevin, and you're going to be the test site using your software, you could write 2 pages and get €300,000. That happened to a professor in UCD. She said, I wrote 2 pages, I sent the 2 pages to a coordinator in Sweden, I completely forgot about it, and we won €380,000. So you have different, you don't have to be a coordinator. And I say to small companies, don't be a coordinator the first time. Work with Trinity, University of Ulster, and so on. These people, like Trinity is here today, they have a fantastic support service, and they know this kind of a game. So at the beginning, be a partner, maybe move on to be a work package leader, and down the road, you could think about being a coordinator. And then you have all the kind of support services in the universities, you have the national support services, and even in Brussels, Evelyn Smith, I don't think she's here today, Enterprise Ireland has an office in Brussels and so on. So you have phenomenal support services, but this is the kind of language that you're going to be hearing this afternoon when you're participating. Now, this is my last slide. We saw targets there of 80 million, 175 million, 1.25 billion. Now, in Horizon 2020, it's all about winning individual projects. Ireland and Northern Ireland, we don't get 100 million. We get, 100, 1.5 million euro projects or whatever. So again, you're the people that are going to bring the funding in. Now, if you analyze the people that win projects, these are the secrets. I've been at this long enough. If I'm putting together a consortium, the first thing I need is a real idea. And I have to stress the word real. There's a lot of rubbish going in. And the evaluators are bored. Oh, God, another food project trying to use. The idea really has to be brilliant. But something more important, you have to learn how to sell the idea to the evaluators. So understanding the evaluation process is absolutely critical. So being an evaluator is the best way to do that. But I think a lot of the advisors you have, and I saw Aidan Kennedy there and Paul, some of the consultants, I think, you've actually evaluated. So that's something you're bringing to the table. You need the best partners. You don't need, I met a guy from Croatia with a great few pints together. Geez, I'll ring him. Forget it. He's either the world's expert in his field, so you pick the best partners, the Fraunhofer, the VTT in Finland, the TNO. So, but you must impress these people. So that's what the networking is about. And the coordinator really has to be experienced. Whenever I see somebody, a beginner being a coordinator, I said, God, brilliant idea, but it won't succeed. You must understand the concept of impact. What impact will this have on policy? So that's becoming a big challenge. And then you have to have somebody who understands the rules, how to fill in the forms, and so on. You leave out one of those boxes and you're dead. So having a brilliant idea, brilliant team, we can't fill in the forms, you're dead. So that's the secret. And I think you can see the importance of it is doable, but you need all the support you can get to actually do it. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually on schedule. So I hope I hope you enjoyed it, and in the discussion later on, I hope we can answer some of your questions. So thank you very much.